or 62 inches long. And what we had to do was to drill only 1 inch at a time, so that we don't heat the rock. Because if you hit the rock, perhaps you'd be heating the air inside, and if you measure the air inside temperature after you drill, then your temperature is higher than what it really is. So we had to drill only 1 inch at a time and break the material that we had drilled through, and then vacuum it, wait until everything cools down completely like the normal temperature, and drilled 1 inch and so on. So the drilling operation of some 60 inches took nearly 2.5 days, just because of this business of having to drill only 1 inch at a time to cool everything, not to change the temperature of the rock, and therefore not to heat the air inside the chamber. So now we are ready to sample the air, and that was done by Dr. Tanz from NOAA, and 6 canisters of air had been taken, and the air was taken from 3 different levels, just in case there had been any stratification of the air. One thing that we recognized immediately after breakthrough was the fact that there was no change in pressure whatsoever, which means that there is communication between the air inside and out. And so we recognized this right away, but we continued the whole operation as if the chamber had been hermetically sealed. So we had these samples of air taken, and the air sample not only ran through water, but also ran through antiseptic solutions, so that we can pick up any of the microscopic organisms, bacteria or whatever. It's to study whether there is any bacteria in the air inside. Actually, it turned out to be absolutely none. And the air composition inside is not very different from the outside composition in terms of certain things, and also very different in terms of others. For example, the air inside and out had exactly the same amount of freons, which means there's the communication between the two. But it had the hydrogen inside was completely depleted. The only reason for that maybe is because there is a bacteria that eats hydrogen inside, a hydrogen-eating monster inside, which we had not sampled yet. And the other change, the other difference, is the fact that the carbon dioxide inside the pit was twice as much as the concentration of carbon dioxide in the ambient air, which means that there's something inside that's giving off carbon dioxide, which may come from the organics, whether it is from the wood or the rope with the wood, or driven off the limestone walls by water from rain or whatever. But there is a great deal of, or twice as much carbon dioxide. And we had the carbon dioxide dated, and it comes out to about 2,000 years old, which means it's in between the very ancient air and the very young air. And so there are all kinds of things regarding the air that we really don't understand yet, and that the analysis of, or the interpretation of the air analysis continues to this day. So one of the things that we had to accomplish then was the photography, and that took about 5 days. And the very first view that we had from the monitors and so on was the hole itself. And then as we get into see the views on the monitor, which was protected by a tent right next to the site. Then was the very first view was like that. This is the shot from the TV monitor, and you can see the eastern side of the pit, and the bottom at the bottom right there you see the pieces of wood, very much like the very first case with the assembled pieces of wood, and the white pieces are right here are pieces of mortar that had fallen from between the blocks, very much like that one here. So the situation was nearly identical in the same two pits. And one of the things that we did that we left inside was the monitor of the temperature and humidity. This is the only thing that we really did different, is that we decided to leave the temperature and humidity monitors inside, because we recognized that there had been communication between the air inside and out. And so that when we sealed the hole that we drilled, which is right here, that has O-rings that attached so that we can let one wire through, which we can go now periodically and measure the temperature and the humidity percent periodically at the site. And the interesting thing is that the temperature in there is almost always high, like 81 degrees. and the humidity is almost always higher, like 84 degrees. And this, as a matter of fact, may be one reason of the preservation of the wood. People think about humidity as a bad thing for wood. But if you keep the humidity content constant, whether it is low or high, the wood will stay okay. Because it seems that the cells of the wood have a capacity to absorb moisture. So if you take this podium, and if it is natural wood, I'm sure it's not, I'm sure it's all plastic. But if it's wood, then, and you put it in a dry environment, then it's losing all of the moisture inside. And then you put it in a humid place, then it absorbs moisture. And it is the expansion and shrinkage, and expansion and shrinkage is the bad thing about the wood, but for wood. But if you kept the temperature or the humidity percent constantly high, if the wood, after the wood expanded and absorbed all of the moisture, but it remained so, then it would have perhaps been preserved. And so that this, we believe, may be the cause of the preservation of the wood for 4,500 years in that manner. One of the last things that we wanted to show right here is the fact that even though we now have two boats, one is already in a museum and one remains in a pit, and we have all kinds of illustrations of what these boats might mean, there is really very little information on what these boats were used for. There is still a controversy among the Egyptologists as to what the purpose of these boats were. Whether they were funerary, meaning used in the funerary procession to bury the body of Pharaoh, or whether they were symbolic. For people call them the solar boats because of images like this, where there is the gods carrying a boat and the boat is being sent towards the sun. So there is a great deal of mystery that relates to these boats. That the only thing that we know is that they are related to either death or afterlife. So there is indeed a great deal still to learn, even though we have seen these and we have touched one of them and we have investigated another by remote sensing. There is much still to see and to learn about these boats in ancient Egypt. And I would like now to show you a clip of film that was taken by the National Geographic Society on the site of the investigation, to give you a feel of the excitement of doing something like that in Egypt. Can you now show the television clip, please? It's about 14 minutes, and it will go through the whole operation briefly and showing you the part of that excitement.
happy because we